what is your next? And your next could be a certification. It could be a job expansion. It could be serving on a volunteer board. It doesn't have to be a promotion, but what is your next? And how are you putting intentionality around that right now?
Welcome to the Seismic Shift podcast, where we explore the seismic shifts that are shaking up the way that you work and the way that you live. And I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Johnston, and I have such a treat for all of my listeners today. I want to introduce you to a true female advocate and a badass, Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer. Give it up for Dr. Cynthia is in the house. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to see you.
Oh, seriously. So Cynthia and I met at a speakers conference probably a year and a half ago in Detroit. And it was an Impact 11 conference bringing together all kinds of keynote speakers. And we just bonded. We have similar experiences, similar interests. And I had just published my book and she was about to launch her book. And this is a bestseller, Now, Near, Next. And this episode is dedicated to all of the women out there in the workforce really trying to find their way. And the tagline is, the second title is A Practical Guide for Mid-Career Women to Move from Professional Serendipity to Intentional Advancement. So as you know, Cynthia, I'm all about seismic shifts. And the seismic shift that I discovered in my research and as an executive coach is that we have to move to a lens of connection. It's got to be all about connection. And so the first question that I ask all of my guests on this podcast is about connection with self, because I think that sets the foundation for everything. So will you share with our listeners your story? Tell us about you.
Yes, thank you. I spent 30 plus years in corporate America, for-profit, nonprofit, international organizations, public held, privately held, predominantly in human resources. So very people focused, and had the opportunity after about 13 years with a health system. There was a CEO change. And as part of that change of control, my position was eliminated. However, during that year preceding, I had been working on my book that you just mentioned and really thinking a lot about what is my next? What is my next step? I thought that was going to be 3 to 5 years from now, as I considered what my encore would be. And I knew that I wanted to continue to give back, celebrate women, amplify women's potential. And so, I was on a journey to sort of pave the way toward what I thought would be my encore career. As life would have it, that was accelerated. And so I had the opportunity to either go back into the corporate world, late stage, right, as a last, and final, which sounded exhausting, quite frankly, to go start all over in a company at 56 years old. And so I took the leap, partly because I had the blueprint to do it. And so that really, in summary, was my conviction. At that point, I knew there's something to this. It was a hindsight moment, right? I was positioned to do something I never would have done had I not had a plan.
Wow. And so that plan, then tell us about what you ended up doing.
Yeah. So I fast forwarded. I had already received my board certification for executive coaching, like you. Had been doing a lot of public speaking work within the corporate sector. The book was ready to go to print, so that was already in motion. So I launched my own consulting practice and spent time doing a lot of executive coaching, some group coaching, a fair amount of public speaking, and always researching for what is next in the way of authoring, the next book. But really focused on women. I do have men clients as well, as they think about allyship and building more diverse executive teams, et cetera. But my sweet spot and my love and my passion is really around helping women to live into their complete and full potential. because I think so often we put ourselves last and we're pouring into everyone else. And it's a privilege to be able to pour in to these women.
Oh, absolutely. And as you and I are of similar age, so much of our careers, we were told to fit in and not to lean in with our superpowers. And I took that really seriously. And so didn't feel like I could be my authentic self and lead like I wanted to lead, using the gifts that I knew that I had, or maybe I didn't even know I had. I just tried to blend in and be like everybody else and tone it down. And it didn't work, because ultimately we as women can't really be happy and truly effective when we're trying to be somebody either that we're not, right? Or just somebody else. And so tell me, the next question is about seismic shifts. So you were looking at the landscape, you were in corporate America, and now all of a sudden that was accelerated. You're starting your own company, you're coaching, you're speaking. What are some of the seismic shifts that you're seeing that really are affecting the way that we live and the way that we work?
Yeah, I think the seismic shift we're trying to create is helping women be more intentional. So I would love to see the future when people are talking about the seismic shift has been women being more intentional in their career planning, being their authentic self, as you said, and looking up, because we're so conditioned to put our head down and work hard and wait to get tapped. The seismic shift that I'm seeing, though, in the research, and it's a little alarming to me, is that we went through COVID. It's amazing we're still talking about that, but we're still dealing with the aftermath. And we went to so many people working from home, working hybrid, et cetera. And what the data shows us, the Gartner data and others, is that women and the Black, Indigenous, people of color communities really are thriving in those environments and prefer those environments. It allows them to multitask, to manage all of the competing demands, and quite frankly, minimize some of the microaggressions that happen inside a lot of workplaces. However, at this point, companies are starting to feel the need to bring everybody back. And I understand that. Obviously, not all work is portable. But in this move to bring everybody back and not realizing the impact of minimizing the talent pool, because women and minorities have gotten really comfortable and have done quite well. I mean, we've really seen a globalization of the workforce because you can work from anywhere. The bigger concern I have is the step back that I think is possible. And that is over 60% of leaders that Gartner studied still feel that if you're not walking the hallway, you are not showing up and fully performing. And that the promotion is going to go to those that they can visibly see in the hallway and at the water cooler and in the offices. Even though the data conflicts with that, the data shows that people are as productive or more productive in these hybrid and work from home situations. So even though the data is clear about performance, we are really lagging in terms of leaders understanding the capabilities of people working in these remote environments. It worries me that we're going to see more women and the BIPOC community have fewer and fewer chances at those promotional opportunities.
So what's the solution? What do we do?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. First of all, I think, again, our theme is intentionality. Connection is so important. And I think that this aligns. It's also about being intentional. So we really suggest find your moment. If you have those opportunities where your work is remote or your work is hybrid, don't take that for granted. Don't assume that that's good enough. Find those moments. If there are days where the majority of folks are in the office, that might be a good day for you to be in and making connections. And don't book your day full of meetings where you're in an office with the door shut, because that doesn't solve anything, right? So it's find those opportunities to connect for coffee or lunch. Find those opportunities to be in the building, if that makes sense in your environment, where you can have those connection opportunities, even build those virtual connection opportunities, but be intentional about it, because out of sight, sadly, and not just, but a bit out of mind.
Oh, you are absolutely right. And so much of what I'm advocating for people to do now in order to combat this loneliness epidemic and to connect more with people is, I say the same thing. Your connection has to be intentional. And I'm advocating, look at your calendar and don't think of it as just meeting management. Think of it as connection, a connection cadence, and be intentional. So first, what are your priorities, and who are the people needed to get you to achieve those goals, your priorities, right? And then make sure that you're intentional and you embed time to connect, and don't just think it has to be a Zoom. You're absolutely right. If people are going to the office on Wednesday, go to the office. Make sure you have coffee, have lunch, show yourself as more collaborative. You're absolutely right. We've got to shift this perspective from one of just achievement, and how to achieve was just meeting, to think about how are you showing up? How can you best connect? You're absolutely right. And it's got to be intentional. I love that. Your book is full of excellent advice. And I love how there are heels for That's the right. graphics to ignite intentionality. There's a heel. I love that. And tell me about you end your emails with Zeal. Tell me about that.
That's right. So, for us, it's all about energy. Zeal is energy. And we believe it's this notion of moving forward. The through line of the book is start intentionally working on your future today. As women, we put it off. We're so busy pouring into others. And it's not just the moms, it's women in general. We find someone to love up on and pour into. It could be the neighbor, our church, our community, pick a place. Naturally, we find someone to nurture and to put ahead of ourselves from a priority perspective. So not after the kids go off to kindergarten or graduate college or the partner lands their perfect job. Right now, even if it's 7 minutes a day, what are you doing to invest in your future? And, it doesn't mean don't do your day job with excellence. Do your day job with excellence, but you can still carve out time to think about what is my next and what baby steps am I taking to prepare myself to get there. And connection is one of those things. I made the mistake when we were going through a leadership transition. We were remote. I happened to be one of the few women on the team. The guys were going into the office. They're very collaborative. It's a very fraternal kind of way in which they operate. They have the meeting before the meeting. Women are wired to perform and check the boxes. And I've got to get these things done because I have these 97 other things to do. And we show up when we're expected to show up. And it was a learning moment for me that I really lost ground building connection with that new leadership team, because in my mind, I was killing it. I mean, I was working 12-hour days. I was, performing. I was putting forth all the work, but I wasn't building those critical connections of the people that were going to matter collaboratively to get my idea down the field or to get my project moved forward. So that was a real learning moment for me. But it's about energy. It's about pouring into how am I investing in me a little bit every day toward my future.
Wow. Let's unpack. You really shared a lot of excellent advice with our listeners. The one thing I love, thank you for sharing your story. You're absolutely right. A lot of women, we just put our head down and we do it and we get it done. And I feel that I made similar mistakes for a while in academia. I just put my head down and I was all about, okay, what do I have to do to get tenure? How many publications do I need to? What kind of journals? Okay, check. And I still have a colleague who teases me. He would say, yeah, I tried to pop in your office, Michelle, but you wouldn't have me, or you'd have me for 4 minutes and then shoo me out because I had things to do because I was a working mom and I had to pick up my daughter from carpool and I couldn't just sit there all afternoon and hop from office to office, because it was also important for me to be there for her. her. And
Right.
so as women, particularly as working moms, we have all of these conflicting priorities. And you're absolutely right. We cannot forget how important it is to be seen and to embed time into collaborating. And I think that intentionality is great advice. So when you're looking at your calendar, again, I call it your connection cadence now, you're looking at your calendar rather than scheduling meeting after meeting after meeting. If you, like you said, if you are going to be on site, we call them power hours, some of my executives, and I encourage them to round throughout their building power hours and to do it every day. So one of my executives from 1 until 2 every day after lunch, he does his power hour and he does his rounding. And that's where he bonds, he connects, he shows that he's visible. It's not just for optics. He's really making a difference. And so you're absolutely right. That's great advice, Cynthia. Embed into your calendar time to be visible, time to connect, and time to collaborate. I have learned too that we do need each other. So as much as it's beneficial for our jobs to stay at home and knock it out, we do need to find ways to, go into the office occasionally. Even I was just interviewing on my podcast, a CEO of a technology company called Capado, and they're totally remote. And Ted Elliott, the CEO, said, yeah, he realized now once a quarter, he gets all the leaders together. Is it expensive? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes. Because we need to see each other in order to perform and to innovate. So let's give some more tips, because I love your tips for being intentional. And tell me more about energy, because I truly believe that's one of the chapters in my new book is you have to shift your energy. Tell me about energy.
I think it's a couple things, and it's meeting people where they are, because what brings you energy may deplete me, and vice versa. We're probably more alike than we are different, but you get the point. Some of your listeners may be going, "Oh my gosh, a power hour of rounding? That sounds exhausting. That sounds like that would literally suck my energy," because maybe they're a little more introverted. So it's finding ways for you to be intentional to create that connectedness that work for you. I like to say I'm a competent extrovert. I'm probably a little more introverted than people realize. And so I have to be thoughtful about the thing that I can do that is going to give me energy and help me do the things that sometimes are a little more difficult. So networking isn't my favorite thing to do. Surprisingly, it's kind of important, especially when you run your own business, right? But taking somebody along with me who is a natural networker or who knows the individuals that are going to be at an event and can make those warm introductions, I'm fine once I'm there and we have that interaction. But the idea of going it solo is like, oh, I could probably think of 1,000 things I'd rather be doing. So I think what's important about giving energy is figuring out what are the things that naturally fill your cup, that give you intrinsic satisfaction, that you do with excellence, spontaneously. Do more of that. Find jobs and roles that allow you to flourish in your talent. And the things that you know you need to do as part of a well-rounded career, connectivity, et cetera, figure out the path that works best for you, but don't avoid it, right? Put your energy around finding a way to do that. And so maybe on their power hour, for some, they're taking somebody else along each day and they're introducing them and mentoring them and showing them the value of what it means to round. That might take a little bit of the pressure off if they have to do all of the thinking what to talk about. Probably at the CEO level, they've mastered that. But I know a fair amount of CEOs themselves that are a little more introverted. So
you're absolutely right. Make it work for you, and match energies. Another thing that you said earlier, Cynthia, which is so important, and I learned my mentor is Marshall Goldsmith, and he and Sally Helgeson wrote a book, How Women Rise.
yes.
And one of the things that and Marshall is on me all the time because it makes me so uncomfortable to promote myself. He said women in particular think that their work is going to speak for itself. And if you do the work, then everybody's going to know about it and they're all going to see the great work you're doing. Nope. Everybody's all caught up in their own stories. They don't know what you're doing. They don't spend time thinking about what you're doing. Your work doesn't speak for yourself. And so you don't want to come across as pompous, as arrogant, as braggadocious. And at the same time, nobody else is going to promote you and
That's
let
right.
people know the great work that you're doing.
Yeah, we actually talk about that. The difference between self-promotion and getting out and sharing and your what you're doing and the work and your aspirations, because people aren't mind readers. And so as much as people don't know all the glowing things that you're doing, they also don't know what you hope is your next if you don't tell them. I think it comes from, I've been thinking a lot about this through the research. And if you think about young girls going through academics, right, as we're students in middle school and high school and so on, generally speaking, generalization, most little girls are putting their head down, they're working hard, they want to get the good grades and they're getting the gold star. And our boys are silly and rambunctious and throwing paper wads and doing all the things, right? At some point we move into the corporate world and the boys have matured and they're still looking up and looking forward and collaborating and all of the things and putting their aspirations into the universe. And we're still conditioned to put our head down, work hard, and wait to get tapped. And so it's this notion of this unconditioning about how do we help women to look up, look forward, put their aspirations into the universe, talk about the things they've done, and celebrate those things rather than feeling, oh, that's not being humble. So we talk about some of the ways to do that is speak to the facts, speak to the team. You can celebrate the team. Sometimes it's you individually. Oftentimes there's other hands that are involved in what we do. But speaking to, I'm super excited about this data that's fallen this way, the results that are doing this or that thing. So it sort of takes a little bit of the pressure off of, did you see that I sold XYZ? I'm really excited this month we landed this many contracts. And so you can put it out there in a way that people can celebrate it with you, but don't expect them. They've got their own things to think about, that they're automatically looking. Men are promoted on potential. Women are promoted. Think that they're promoted on performance.
Yeah, I love what you emphasize, Cynthia, about the power of language, right? It's really being intentional about the words that you choose when you're talking about the projects that you've worked on and you want to celebrate. I'm really excited about the project that just launched, that we just launched, and the results that we're getting from the data. I'm excited about what the data is showing that's going to help us move forward. I love your advice I'm all about practical advice, like what can our listeners do today, tomorrow, right, to showcase the great work that they're doing. In not a braggadocious type way. So it's using the we, focusing on the facts, look at what the results are showing us and how it's going to advance our efforts, and also giving shout outs to those who are helping them. I don't think we embed enough time in meetings. So I hear in all of my data collection, I'm trying to figure out what accelerates connection in organizations and what kills connection. And what I'm hearing is we don't do enough of celebrating wins. We don't do enough of giving shout outs to each other and saying, great job. It's like that intentionality piece, Cynthia. We're not embedding time in our meetings to say, hey, we want to hear from you all. Who do you want to give a shout out to?
Absolutely.
And that's so important. We as humans, we want to feel that A, we have purpose, B, the work that we're doing is meaningful, it's adding value, and that people appreciate it and they see it, right? And as humans, we need that acknowledgement. So, all right, I want you to share, what are some things right now that women should stop doing that are hurting their careers?
I think a lot of it has to do with boundaries. So when we researched women around this whole idea of intentionality and starting working on their future today, the first thing that comes up is, where would I find the time? And the framework we really think about is this: how much internal value do I perceive it to have? It fills my cup. It brings me joy. I'm good at it. I like doing it. And how much external value do I perceive? Perceive is an important word that it has. It's important to my children's school. It's important to my employer. It's important to my church. We tend to put everything in the top right quadrant. Everything is important and requires our time and attention. And the thing that we often give up when push comes to shove is the thing that we love that we don't think has high enough external value. It's the getting to the gym. It's the getting to that yoga class. It's whatever that thing is, that's the thing we give up because it's important to us, but maybe it doesn't feel like it has as much external value. Instead of, what is that thing that has perceived external value? But you know what? I'm not good at it. Or it doesn't bring me joy, or it's not moving me forward in my career. And how do we then think differently about delegating that? And that could be delegating it from the perspective of, I wasn't good at volunteering in my kids' school. I tried it. I thought that it would be really great and that would be a huge mommy moment. It made me crazy. I was not good with those first and second graders and they were naughty and I just wanted to go back and be with adults. So I can bring Kleenex to the school or I can pen a, $15 check for school supplies. That helps me address that external value without contributing time that I didn't have and that quite frankly, I wasn't good at and didn't enjoy. And then remembering no is a complete sentence. And as it relates to our careers, I think the same is held true in our jobs where we often will take on responsibilities that are nurturing and nice. And because we're caregivers and we start to create a brand and others will acquiesce the note taking, the creating of the PowerPoint, the organization of the meeting, et cetera, which I experienced peer-to-peer as an executive vice president. My male executive vice presidents would turn to me to do all of the crafting and coordination. And I did it thinking that I was, I'm good at it and it's not hard for me to do. And what I realized at one point is I'm enabling this really bad behavior, number one. And I am overburdening myself with all these tasks and responsibilities that these gentlemen are either A, capable of doing, or B, have an assistant that's equally capable of doing. So where are your boundaries and what are you pouring into instead of ensuring that, is it a time? Is it worth your time? Or can you dedicate different kind of talent? Or maybe you need to delegate it entirely.
I love that. I could not agree with you more. And I'm seeing a shift. And I want more and more women in particular to give themselves permission to put themselves first. And that feels so uncomfortable. Right. And I learned this from a male leader that I was coaching. And we were on Zoom. It was during the pandemic. I said, and his name's Steve LeBlanc, and he's now out in California as a leader. And I said, wow, what are you doing differently? You sound great. And he said, I finally told my family that after gaining 20 pounds during the pandemic, I was miserable. I was unhealthy. I was no longer working out. I just sat on Zooms all day. I had to prioritize myself. And I framed it in a way that I told my family, I've got to get up and work out because I'm not doing it and it's having tremendous bad negative consequences for me. He said, so Michelle, I just started putting myself first. And even though I'm not there, I get up in the morning, I go for my run and I eat my healthy choice, whatever for lunch. I finally have a routine that's working for me and I put myself first. Cynthia, seriously, that conversation, I finally then gave myself permission to say, oh my gosh, I can put myself first too. Now, for our listeners, it's much easier now for me to do that because my daughter's in college. So I don't have to get up and make her lunch and get her to school and then get to the office. And I totally understand the mornings can be really insane for those of us who are working, have kids at home. My kid's not at home anymore. So I get up every single day and I get the workout in. And let me tell you, this morning I was miserable. absolutely miserable doing this ergo fit. I never knew what ergo fit was. I still don't know what I'm doing. But I get up and I make myself do it because I know it's going to benefit me. And then everybody else who interacts in my world is going to benefit because I'm healthy, right? And I think that's one of the
Absolutely.
shifts, is to really prioritize ourselves. And so if you can't do it in the morning, have a discussion with your family and figure out when you can prioritize your health, because you're no good to anybody unless you're good first to yourself.
Exactly. And you know what? So I'm an empty nester as well at this point. But we still can fall into that trap. With our mornings are different, right? But when I was still in corporate America, and I talk about this in the book, I would get up at 5 a.m. every morning to start. I liked to sort of ease into my workday, and I'd get a lot of project work done and things like that. When I started writing the book, I didn't think I could give up that time. So I started getting up at 4 a.m. and writing from 4 to 5 a.m. Why I thought that 5 a.m. in the morning until 7 a.m. in the morning was my company's time, that was on me. And so here I was adjusting. Now I'm getting up at 4 a.m. so that I can write, because heaven forbid I used that other time that I had previously dedicated to my employer. That's a lack of boundaries, right? So even in those situations where you don't have children or you empty nest or what have you, we can still not put ourselves first, or even in the top 5.
Correct, which is
right?
A great segue to the final question of share with our listeners, 2 to 3 pieces of advice, things that they can do right now, this afternoon, tomorrow, to advance their career. So I know you had shared earlier to really kind of be intentional and think about it. What can they do? Give them tips so that they can put themselves first and be intentional with the next.
Yeah, I think I would say 3 things. First, evaluate how you're investing in yourself and your future. So the women we spoke to around the globe, 900 collective years of experience, 5 race ethnicities, 4 countries, a 20-year age band, because mid-career, by the way, is from about 28 years old to 60 and growing. It's not midlife. Those women were not being intentional in taking time. So evaluate that. And even if it's 7 minutes a day, listen to a podcast, read a book, read a white paper, something that's investing in your future. Number 2, what is your next? And your next could be a certification. It could be a job expansion. It could be serving on a volunteer board. It doesn't have to be a promotion, but what is your next? And how are you putting intentionality around that right now? And thirdly, when you figure out what next is, tell someone. Find someone to sponsor you and to put that aspiration into the universe, because no one can read your mind. So figure out what it is and start working toward it, and let somebody know that can keep that on their radar, so that when that opportunity comes up, they're saying your name in a room that you're not.
Oh, that's beautiful advice, Cynthia. Thank you so much for sharing with our listeners what you've learned personally, what you've learned from all of the research you've conducted, what you've learned from writing the book, what you learned from your career. And I applaud you. You're crushing it. And I'm so, so happy for you. And I know that our listeners really enjoyed hearing from you. So give it up again for Dr. Cynthia. Thank you so much for being on the Seismic Shift podcast.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm a huge fan, so it's a real honor.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, y'all. See you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Seismic Shift. And before you go, can I ask one favor of you? Do you mind sharing today's episode with a leader you know? The power of this conversation is found in your using it and sharing it to create real connection in your life. Lastly, I'd like to thank Loyola University New Orleans and the Terra Firma audio team for helping bring this content to life.